water down here. So yeah, so I make things out of wood, but my day job has very little to do with that. I work in homes. I work at C up in Bentonville. If you haven't been, check it out. It's very nice. I like it. But
Restaurant's very good.
oh, the restaurant's great. Yeah. But yeah, when I come home and on the weekends, I make things out of wood. So I have some notes. I'm gonna try and follow. So forgive me if I put my head down and read through that at some point. But yeah, so I took a class in undergrad. I went to art school and got a degree in conceptual art. I was doing performance art / sculpture, and I took a class in 18th century woodworking. It was just some random undergrad class. I really liked working with wood and stuff, and so I took this class, and that was a very, very long time. But I really loved it, and it kind of stuck in my head for a long time. And then I went back to making conceptual stuff, and I went to grad school, and I made conceptual sculpture / performance again. And I really liked doing that, but at a certain point, I was just kind of going in a cycle of applying to a show and making work for a show, and then going to that show, and then taking that down and doing all that over again. It felt it didn't feel like I was doing anything of importance with the work that I was making. I liked the work that I was making. And I like to think that other people did too, but it wasn't necessarily fulfilling after a certain amount of time. So when COVID happened, well, it was a little bit before COVID, but really when COVID happened, all of my shows got canceled. I had a bunch of shows that were for my conceptual art that were all set up. They all got canceled, and I was stuck at home, and I used that opportunity of time to build myself a workbench. And this particular workbench is called a Moravian workbench. The Moravian people are, it's a sect of Protestant Christianity that was based in what is now Czech Republic and Czechoslovakia, and before that it was, I probably got that in a note somewhere. Oh, Saxony. Is it Saxony? No, Saxony is where they moved to. So they got kicked out of what is now Czech Republic. And then they moved to Saxony, which is now East Germany. And then they moved to the US in the 18th century. And so they're partially a religion, but also they were a community, a collective community. So they were a little bit an ethnicity as well, so when they came over to the States, they did a lot of missionary work that was part of their thing. So they would move to a lot of places. So this bench is actually built to come apart, and we brought it in the car in pieces. I was going to put it together for you in live and in person, because it only takes like a minute, but it's a pain, so we did it beforehand. Also, my back's hurt. I don't know. But as you can see, the top comes off. These legs come out. These are, I'll use my big, what do you call it, door hammer? So these are tusks. They're tusks, and these are tenons. And you just put them in there, and it's very, very solid. It's a way of constructing something that can be broken down easily and quickly, but creates a vast amount of strength. And a workbench has to be very, very strong. I learned how to build this, not just blindly. There's a guy named Will Myers who did a lot of research on these kinds of benches specifically, and he has online courses. I took that online course and learned how to make it. It also has a wooden vise. So this is actually a wooden screw. All of this stuff can be made by hand very easily. This one can't so much. It's a modern day vise, or very old modern day vise, post-industrialization vise, I should say. These are also part of the bench. These are called holdfasts. And these are hand forged. I didn't forge them. But you use these to hold down stuff. There's a lot of different ways you can hold things to this bench. So these were made long before machinery was used to make anything. They're really simple. You have little holes in the bench, and you just watch your ears. Everybody, it's going to be loud. Can't really move it, so you can saw with it or whatever. Get it out. Just bang on the back of it. So it's all like really simple, easy tricks and physics. Nothing about this is particularly difficult. It's just, learning how to do it and taking the steps to do it. So as I was saying, I built this workbench, and then I decided to make a little stool. And then I made a little table, and then somebody asked me to make a bigger table, so I made them a table. And then somebody else saw that table and asked me to make them their table. I made another table. And that just kind of started this momentum where I always have a project that I'm working on. And it's really nice. I mean, it's very helpful to me because I feel like my stuff that I create is staying in a place for a long time and getting used, and it's important to someone. I feel like it becomes a part of someone's history in a way where they can pass it on, and their children can use it, or their neighbors, or whoever gets it next can use it again and again and again. This bench will last so much longer than I will last in the world. And that's really great to see. I mean, there have been examples of these found that are from, I think, the 17th century that are still around. So wood lasts for a very long time if it's in the right conditions. And even if it's in the wrong conditions, it lasts a really long time. Something that I really like about the work that I've been doing is that there's a lot of research and history involved. And I really like history. I like the past, but also I like the stories of the past. I like the idea of figuring out how things were done so that we can do it in the future, not in the exact same way, but in a different, new way. So it's not so much a reverence to the past, like, oh, it was so great back then. Because I don't believe that. But I do believe that there are so many different ways to do things that have been done the same way for thousands of years. And we invent all of these new methods to do. And really, a lot of times, this stuff is faster and easier and less impact on the environment. So actually, let's talk about that. A lot of people say, oh, well, cutting down trees isn't that important. But almost all of the wood I get is storm damage stuff, or stuff that somebody was cutting down and going to throw away. There's a guy out in West Fork who sells wood, and it's all local, and it's great, and it saves it from being thrown away. Also, you sometimes cut some trees down and other trees can grow. It's a cycle. But most of the wood that I get is just storm damaged, or somebody threw it away, and then they come and get it and cut it up, and then I get to use it. So what I was talking about with speed and the use of things, sometimes it's faster to use some of this stuff than it is to use a giant machine. I won't lie, I do have power tools, and I use them, and I love them. But for instance, this is a drill, or so I have a drill press, which is a big machine that has a drill, and it drills holes, and you put things down. You like put them down on a table, and you crank this thing, and then the hole gets down. So it's very fast, but it takes setup. It takes like a lot of setup, especially if you want something to be precise. But this is a really simple direct tool. Now this is a new-ish version. This is from the 1940s, I think. Maybe actually from the 30s. Excuse me, I don't talk this much. So with something like this, if you are trying to make a hole at an angle, so I have this this little bench that I'm going to build for today. It's very, very simple. I guess it's it'll be a little stupid of sorts. I already partially finished it because, stuff takes time. But these holes are angled. They're at a very particular angle. They're at 104 degrees. And if I were to drill this hole on a drill press, I would have to set the table at 104. I would have to figure out how to hold this on that table because the table only has so much space. Then I would have to figure out how to clamp it onto that table. And then I would have to figure out how to emulate that same thing 3 more times. Exactly. So it would be perfect, but it would take a little while. Hi. My name's Danny. But with this, all I have to do is figure out the angle that I want it at. And I have all these different little tools that do this. None of these are by my own invention. And none of them are like something that I scoured the world for or anything. All of this information is really easy to find. During my post-COVID building time, I did a lot of reading. And I read everything I could on hand woodworking. And I went to YouTube University, and I got my degree, and I continue post-education learning there all the time. And I also met a lot of woodworkers, retired woodworkers around the community that are so willing to share their information and their knowledge. And this stuff is a collective community amount of information, and I'm just taking bits and bobs from. So this is a great little tool, as is this. This is my angle gauge. It's just got angles on it. You can move this thing back and forth and you get the right angle. And from there, you can put that angle onto this thing. This thing moves back and forth. Or you can just eyeball it and see what you want, which is how I got this angle to begin with. So I have a couple of these pre-made, but one that is not. Because I figured I'd show you how to do this. This will be number 4. But yeah, so this just goes in here. You can see it's at this specific angle. And so what I did was I just drew a little line. All these lines are at the same angle from the parallel. And that's called a sight line. And from that sight line, I figured out what angle I wanted this to bend out. And that angle is then replicated onto this little thing. And then I put that, all the different things, and I'll show you what I do. Down, buddy. So I take my hold fast to hold this fast. Over here, Jill. It's a loud process. I usually use 2 of these at a time. So I'll talk about what this is in a little bit. Ears. Most of the time I wear earplugs while I'm doing this stuff. So what you do is you put this there, and then it goes a lot faster when you're not explaining it. So then I just emulate this line, and I keep this kind of right in sight. I'll screw it down. And this stuff isn't perfect. I've gotten better at it over the years, emulating the angle. But it takes practice. You have to kind of constantly check and see how you're doing. Sometimes you're doing okay, and sometimes you're not. So now I feel a little piece of the lead screw coming out of the bottom. So undo that. Watch your ears again. How's that? There's that. Flip it over. Do the same thing. Then just go through the same hole that we saw. Emulate the angle. There we go. And then you have a lovely little hole that works great and looks good. So to set this up on a drill press would take about the amount of time that took me to drill the hole, maybe more. So when I'm doing big holes, I usually use this thing. When I'm doing small little holes on a small project, I'll use the drill press because it's there. But I also like hand tools because they're quiet, they're not very messy, I don't have to worry about my fingers getting ripped off. I don't have a very big shop. I have a third of a one-car garage, and that is pretty tight. So this doesn't take up much. Now this is only a very, very small portion of my tools, but and my stuff. But it doesn't need to be very big. When I first started, I was like, oh, I'll make like 50 benches and I'll sell them all at, $180 a piece. And I was trying to like, capitalize on this thing. And I do make money. I mean, I sell my stuff for a profit, but it's not keeping us afloat or anything. And that's important because I don't think that I would want to, if I'm making just for profit and to create capital from this, I would make it very different. This is very much an act of love and care, and it helps me to clear my head, and it helps me to consider things on a different way. It gives me time to just kind of process stuff. It's very meditative. If you have a table saw that you're terrified of all the time worrying, it's a little more tense. It doesn't give me the same amount. So I wanted to show you all the rest of making this, but I also wanted to talk a little bit about some other stuff. Let's see what I was going to talk about. So this is what I'm calling, well, I'm not calling it. It's called staked furniture. And during my time kind of figuring out all of the different woodworking stuff, there's this very popular book called The Anarchist's Design Book. And it's by this guy named Chris Schwartz. He runs a publishing company that is all about historic tools and historic craft. And one of his books goes through and talks about a very, very simple idea of basically there's two kinds of wooden furniture. There's either staked and then there's boarded. So staked is when you have a stick that goes through a hole. And that's basically how that table can be considered stick. These chairs, in a way, can be considered stick chairs. I mean, none of this is wood, but it's sticks, basically. Sticks through boards. Boarded furniture is cabinetry, cupboards. It's boards going together, mostly with dovetails or tenons or just nails. So those are the two kinds. And once you get kind of familiar with those two ways of working, you can kind of make anything. And so what I've been doing since learning that and learning the processes of those two things is I'll look at something, some historical piece of furniture, I'll read about it, I'll read about another piece of historical furniture, and then I'll try to emulate it, at least in part. I like learning about the history of the people who make all that furniture, and the histories that are untold of that, because The history of furniture and just the things of the home are really complex, the objects of the home that we use. So Shiloh Museum has a great collection of stuff and it tells that story well of all of these different things that some were made just for wealthy people, some were much more vernacular, kind of everyday things that were made for use and because they were needed. And a lot of stuff were made by enslaved people, people that don't get their stories told, especially a lot of furniture, a lot of fine furniture as well. A lot of those cabinet shops that were cranking out fine furniture were made by people that we don't have their names because those names were erased. So it's a very sad history a lot of times, but it's also, it's good to keep it in mind. So I want to show off all my little toys here and show you how to use them. So I love all this stuff. It's so much fun. It's like weird little things. They're just great. So I'm going to show you all a few things. They're very sharp, but you're welcome to touch them. Just don't cut yourself. A lot of these things are planes. So how you get a tree from a tree to a board is, well, there's a few different ways. And I didn't bring the splitting kind of way because it didn't fit in the car. But you can split trees and then shave them down on what's called a shave horse. But my shave horse didn't fit in the car. So you can also saw them. And I have a few different saws here. This is a rip saw. So a rip saw is for cutting downward through a board, through its grain. The big thing is also you learn about wood, which is kind of funny, you learn about trees. So grain is what builds a piece of wood. It's a bunch of, a lot of people describe it as a bunch of straws all squished together. So you have a stack of straws. All those straws go one particular way, right? So that's, this is the circle part, and that's the other circle part, and then the straw runs this way. So it's wood is very strong this way, but not as strong this way. So you go with the grain. So rip saw is here. This doesn't take as long as you would expect to use. So, you know, we use a table saw for ripping most of the time. But I actually find that using a rip saw doesn't take that long. Well, it does if you're trying to do it this way. Here. Got to use the right thing. So a rip saw is goes by really fast because it has big old teeth. Once you get it started, it really cuts well. And at first, when I started doing woodworking, I got exhausted very, very quickly. But as soon as I figured out that I can kind of just make my body into like a little machine where my arm is just kind of going back and forth straight, but it really doesn't take that much energy. So when you have a piece of wood that's like 2.5 inches thick, and you run that through a bandsaw or a table saw, it struggles a lot. It's really scary, and sometimes it catches, and it can be difficult. And it can mess up the piece that you're working. So anytime I'm trying to saw through something really hefty, I actually use this because I think it's easier. It works better. I don't have a table saw, but I have a bandsaw. I also brought my my saw that I bought in 2006 and still use all the time. This is a new-ish. Well, I guess it's old now. This is a newish saw. This is called a crosscut saw. So if rip saw does one way, then this does the other way. And it works really quickly. It's great. It's more precise than a bandsaw. And frankly, the same thing is true with a table saw where you have to set something up over and over again. It takes a lot more time than you'd expect to use power tools. Also, they're just scary, you know. So that saw is newish. This one is not so new. This is called a panel saw. This is one of my favorite saws to use, actually. So it does the same thing that this saw does, but in a much more precise way. It also feels nice. Just feels nice. There's something very tactile about it. Doesn't that sound nice too? It just sounds nice.
Yeah.
It's very lovely. See how fine of a line that makes? It makes like a really fine line. So you kind of have to figure out the best tool for the job that you're doing. But all of these tools are pretty easy. This is a Japanese pull saw. There's the hand woodworking that's popular today, at least, is kind of the English stuff, much more based in kind of the English European tradition, and then there's the Japanese style of woodworking. Both are really similar, but there are little differences. So while those saws are actually just cutting as you push, and then you pull back, and you push and cut again, and then you pull back and you push and cut again, this is actually doing it from pulling. So you pull and you pull, and then you push back, and you pull and cut, push back, pull and cut. So it works the same way, but it does the same thing, but it just works ever so slightly different. I don't know, I have a lot of different ones. They're fun. This one is actually easier to cut straight with. So if you have a piece of paper, say this is your saw, if you're pushing the paper, it kind of wrinkles. But if you're pulling paper, it straightens automatically. So this saw is much, much thinner, and it doesn't have any big supports like this one does to keep it straight. But this one stays straight on its own because you're pulling. So it's all nice little, just physics and little tricks and stuff. There's also a myriad of different little cuts, cutting tools. This is something that I use because I am not sure that I have found a hand tool that emulates what this does. So this little thing cuts just like this. You can make these lovely little streams, but you can really clean something up. What this is nice for is you can create curves with it very easily. So you can curve something, you can make it nice and clean cut. Often, because this stuff stays so sharp, you don't have to use sandpaper. Sandpaper has been around for a very, very long time. A lot of people think that that's some new invention, but it's been around for a very, very long time. Huh? Oh, yeah.
Sure. Danny, I was going to ask with the hand saw, how do you make sure, like, if it really matters if it's straight, how do you make sure that it's, like, at least close to perfect? Or is it more of just like you're trying to get something shorter and then you'll do it?
No, you can get really, really precise cuts on this. So, like, I don't know if I used hand saw or not, but so this is a square. And what you do is you basically make one side perfect, and then you measure everything from that perfect side. So how you make the side perfect is through these planes, which I'll show you in just a second. And then you use tools like this to make your perfectly 90-degree angle. So this thing is over 100 years old, and it's perfectly square, which is amazing. I have a an engineer's square, what engineers use to make sure that everything is perfectly 90 degrees. And it's brand new and it's just as square as this thing. But so from here, there's a lot of different ways that you can make this a perfect cut. One of the ways to make it a perfect cut is to create a line with a very, very sharp blade. So I usually use my marking gauge, but that creates this perfect line there. And then you can cut a little kerf into that and saw it. And this line, surprisingly enough, will guide your saw. So you can make a perfect cut that way. There's a lot of different little tricks like that. I think what I've found is there's no shortcuts or anything in woodworking. You just kind of do it. But there's a lot of manners in which to do something as best as possible. And that's a great way. I'll show you the planes because that's a really helpful thing. There's a million different kinds of planes and they all work very differently. But yeah, a saw like that panel saw will give you a smooth enough finish that you can kind of just leave it as is, depending on what you're using. But you can also plane the end grain. So I have a number of different planes. I love planes. They're so pretty. They're just like fun little weird things, and they do a lot of different things. So I'm going to show you my 3 most used planes. This one is called scrub plane. It's got a lot of different names, but I'll call this one a scrub plane. This is called scrub plane because it's got a really wide mouth, and the blade that's inside of this, so I'll show you how these work. Planes are really simple. They've been around for forever, and there's a million different versions of them, but really they're just a blade, a block of wood or metal, and something to hold it down. So this one is one of my favorites. It's used to get rid of a lot of material quickly. So the blade itself has a bit of a curve to it, which means that it can get a lot of material all at the same time. It's a very thick one. So what I'm doing is I'm rolling this little pin back here, and that makes the blade go in or out a bit. So you get like these big, thick pieces. You can pass that around. Yeah, it's really satisfying. Planes are very satisfying. So that gets this like roughness off of the wood. So the wood did look like that, and now it's kind of smooth. I'll do it on this side so you can see it. This is kind of like, it's fine. It's smooth-ish. But as soon as you put this on it, it becomes much cleaner. And it's only taking off little bits because it's not straight. So what the wood is doing is this little toe is riding along on the wood. So it's only cutting off the parts that are above that, whatever it's riding on. So it makes it flat over time. So you get more and more pieces like this that are nice and thick and hefty. And then you move on to a plane like this, what I guess you would call a jack plane, jack of all trades. Or I'm sure there's another reason why it's called jack plane, but that's what I call it. And this one takes what was kind of rough, but then a little bit smoother into a much smoother way. Just a little bit thinner. Now I have this set pretty deep right now. Set it back a little bit. No, not that one. No, not that way. No, not that way. Kind of have to fiddle. So this one is also English. So the screw works backwards. See much. It's a guess and check game. It's a guess and check game. There we go. So that is a much thinner piece. Now let's look at it. You see it's much cleaner blade design. And then from here, which is really the one that you would use the most probably, from here you go down to something like this, which is a smoothing one. So if this had this giant big open mouth and a big curved blade, this one has a slightly smaller mouth. The blade is very straight. This one, like a teeny tiny. You can't get anything through there. So you don't get much wood. And you can hear the difference between them. It's much quieter. So, around. That's much softer. You can kind of see through it. It's very small. And it makes it really smooth. Now this piece has a little knot right there, but it's very smooth and beautiful. You pass that around too. There's a lot of different ways to cut wood, but these are the ways to smooth it down. I was going to bring my draw horse and my draw knife. That's just a big blade, and you roll it along a piece of wood, and that also smooths things out. This thing smooths things out. I'm forgetting the name of this tool. It has a name. Spokeshave, thank you. There's also all sorts of other kinds of planes. And I brought some of these to show you what I like to do. So I like to buy these old planes that look broken. So this plane is very expensive. I mean, a couple $100, it's not $1,000, but it's an expensive plane, and it's a really lovely tool, and it's new, or newish. This is what's called a transition plane, because it was made during the transition from wooden planes like this into metal planes, which I didn't bring one. But so the top is metal, the base is wood. So this is a transition plane. I really like this style of plane. It was made, I don't know, I think like 30s. I think generally these were made like the 10s through the 50s generally. And then really it started around the 40s and 50s. Full metal planes were really what was made beyond that. And I do have some of those, but I really like using these. The all wooden planes are going to be the oldest. And I often buy them for $10 or $15, and they look like this. This is a really lovely plane that, when it's all cleaned up, looks like this. So it has this little foot that moves back and forth. And then it has this little foot that moves up and down. See, this one is missing it. And then it's got this lovely blade. So this is the same tool, but this one is cleaned up and beautiful. This one is old and not so beautiful. But this one can look exactly like this one, with some sanding, some removing of parts and remaking, some polishing, get a little brass thing and screw it on there. They're really simple tools, so they're easy to fix. This one, you ride the piece of wood along here, and this keeps it at a very particular spacing from the edge of the wood. And then this tool keeps it from going beyond anything like that. So you can put a little step or groove or a little tongue into the wood by using this thing. These are for panel raising. They're really beautiful. I love how simple this stuff is. These kind of open up when you unscrew them. And you can create a kind of whatever width you want with these. And they have a blade here and a blade here, and so they make a particular kind of shape of them. And it's actually made for, this one is for window sashes. So this is how the edge of windows would have been made with this. So you learn about a lot of stuff. Like I learned about windows through this plane. I learned about different brass objects. I've learned about metal smithing and all sorts of different stuff. I've learned a lot about the history of how homes are made, all sorts of different things. This is a Japanese style plane. So funnily enough, this is the same difference in planes. So the English style cuts as you push, and the Japanese style cuts as you pull. This one is really great for making little chamfers. So, say you have a piece of wood and you want to cut the corner down on it, you can use this blade and do just that. It's all, you just kind of do it by hand. And it's really beautiful. It works super well. Yeah, that's great. So, I don't know how much time we have left, but I'm going to show you how I put this bench together. So here's our bench. I left one side unchamfered. So chamfering something, you can do this on a table saw, but again, how to put a chamfer this deep on a table saw is really difficult. So you have to stand this thing upright like this on a table saw, because you can't bend a table saw blade that far over. So to get this massive chamfer on something, you either have to create a very complex jig, which is fine, you can do that, or you can just, watch your ears, y'all. You can just use a plane. So we'll see how much I can move this. So this hogs off a lot of the material. And it's kind of messy, and it's kind of, it's not the prettiest to watch somebody work on it. My apologies, but it does the job. And then you get down to a certain amount. Pretty close. Okay. So you get it down to that much-ish. And I have little lines that I've drawn on here. I haven't gone down to the line yet. Just for good measure. Then you take the next blade. And you can hear as it rides across the wood where it cuts, where it still needs to cut. And over time, you'll hear it cut the whole side of it. So I'll spare y'all me doing this the whole time, but it's pretty close to where it needs to be. Take your smoothing plane and then you have a nice bevel. So this is a less perfect side, but honestly, I think if I spent another minute on it, it would be just as good as the others. So that doesn't take much time. It's a good workout. Keeps me a little bit healthier. It's funny, my stamina for breathing has just grown a lot by doing this. Usually I'm not talking while I'm working on it, but so to finish these, so I made these legs beforehand. The legs take a long time, well, not a long time. You saw it out using one of those or a bandsaw. I created it on a little angle, so it's beveled. Then using a plane, I just plane down the corners to make it look a little prettier. It's really, really simple. And then what I do is I create this little cut. And I'll show you what that cut is for. But I'll make that cut for you. So you can tell I like this a lot better. It's better. This one, it's beautiful, but it doesn't hold as strongly. And you can use it just fine, but I like to use this a bit more. Okay, so I'm gonna use this saw to do it. So I'm just gonna cut a little bit of a curve into this leg, right down the center. So now you have this, exactly, it's first gen. So also, this is sassafras wood. It's Arkansas sassafras. It smells really, really good. Let me just, that's too small. All right, I'm gonna mess up one of these legs, but I just want y'all to be able to smell it. It smells so nice. So sassafras wood. So sassafras wood was used a lot to make beds, bedposts. Sassafras has that wonderful smell, and that smell actually keeps bugs away. So sassafras doesn't get buggy very easily. And so people would make beds out of it to keep the bugs away. But a lot of that kind of transferred over into considering it something that protects your dreams. So it gives you good dreams, keeps away bad dreams, but also keeps away bad bugs. So it's a great wood, it's very, very light. It's my favorite wood to use because it smells so nice. I have these numbered. So this is number 2, and they fit right in. This, how I made this circular, there's a million different ways to do so, and I have a lot of tools to do it, but I find that just carving it down, trying it out, carving it down some more with a knife is the absolute fastest and most particular way of doing it. It works really fast, and it's very, it works well. So that's number 1. So these just fit in just like so. 3 here. 4 here. And then I've cut these little chamfers to put in to make it stay. So see they have the lines cut, curves cut. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna line these up in a sort of nice way. Like that maybe. Seems good. The angle on them is pretty good. You're just eyeballing it, you know, it's not bad. Then you have this lovely stool, but if you never want it to be able to be taken apart, use these. Now, another thing that people think is like a newfangled thing is glue. Glue has also been around for a long time. It was made out of animal skin, but it's been around for a long time. And actually, they still make that glue, rabbit skin glue. And I particularly like using it because you can unglue it very easily. So it's great for any antiques. I like to fix old antiques, not only with tools, but old tables and chairs and all sorts of things. So most of those are using rabbit skin glue or hide glue, where you can heat it up and it comes apart. But with these, you don't need glue, you just need these little wedges. So what happens is, as I wedge this in, the top of it goes like that, it mushrooms out, so it sticks into the hole. It'll never come out. then you'd cut that off. So let's do it for all of them. And we have a nice little bench. And the top of this is sweet gum. Yeah. Who knew that sweet gum was so beautiful? Sweet gum are the, the trees with the little gum balls that are sharp. That's what's inside of that. Isn't that amazing? There you go. So now those are not moving at all. They're nice and strong and in there tight. And then what you would do is you would saw these off, and you would saw this to be flat, which there's a myriad of different little ways to do that. You have a nice bench. It feels comfy. Thank you.